This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for another edition of the Primetime Podcast right here on Most Valuable Podcast, talking a little college football, talking a little college basketball. Got a jam-packed show because we got both, Brandon. Talking college basketball because John Beilein could be making a beeline right out of college. See what I did there? Making a beeline right out of college basketball to the NBA. Him might be the head coach of the Detroit Pistons. Then we're going to look at the NBA draft, taking a look at Grayson Allen. I had to think about it because all day I've been saying Grayson Young, and I have no idea why. But we're going to see how high he should be drafted in the NBA draft. Then we're going to go into college football and talk about Florida State. DeAndre Francois, should he be starting this year? What should FSU do in Willie Taggart's first season as head coach of the Seminoles? But before we get into everything, a little bit of housekeeping here. Number one, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. That's where you help support the channel. You can also come on a podcast each and every month. You're at the $10 tier, so check that link down below in the description, also in the description, or at mostvaluablepodcast.com. You can check out our store, get yourself an MVP t-shirt, and also on mostvaluablepodcast.com, you can check out everything for MVP each and every day. And then last but not least, make sure to go on Apple Podcasts and Apple iTunes, give the Primetime Podcast a 5-star rating, and then type a little something about why people should check it out. It'd be much appreciated by both Brandon and myself. But Brandon, let's jump into everything, and we're going to start with John Beilein, because before the weekend, it came out, you know what? John is interviewing with the Pistons, and I looked at my phone, and I saw it, and I went, ooh, this could be pretty damaging for Michigan. Not really for John Beilein, but for the Michigan program. We're going to look at that probably at the end, but the thing I want to ask you, just plain and simple to start this, should John Beilein leave Michigan for the Pistons?
I don't necessarily think so. And part of that is because what John Beilein's doing with Michigan, clearly what we saw by this past season, I think they had the most wins that they've ever had with 33, at least under him. They showed that they're a good team, a competitive team in the Big Ten, and a team that can compete with some of the other big programs even outside of the Big Ten and the big teams, that everyone is always talking about and everything like that. And I think that the way that they now always come tournament time, you're going to need a little bit of luck, and they certainly got that. I mean, we all remember the game against Houston where they won it right at the end at the buzzer. And there's always going to be that type of excitement and stuff in games, and it could have gone either way. But this Michigan team, that they had a lot of really good pieces, and it's because John Beilein knows how to put a team together that way, and the way that he runs his offense is kind of spread the floor with some really good skill shooters and be able to kind of hurt you that way. I just don't think that you go for him. For him, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me, because I don't really think that he'd be going for a bigger payday. That wouldn't necessarily. I don't want to say that it wouldn't make sense, because of course if you can get more money then you do that, but it wouldn't make sense the way that he's doing it.
The only thing I want to throw out about that,
sure,
and this is the other side of it, yeah, you're going to make more money with the Pistons because NBA teams will pay more than Michigan teams, but because of where we're at now, and I'll let you read the Woj bomb that basically he dropped, I'm going to call it a Woj bomb, that he dropped before we were recording about Beilein. The thing that he can use now with this tweet coming out is basically, you know what? I did this. I got this far. When my contract comes up, or before my contract comes up, maybe Michigan might have to pony up a little more dough to keep me around at Michigan, because you know what? I can leave for the NBA whenever I want.
So reading an article earlier, they brought up that point, and they brought up how for Michigan last year, I believe it was a softball coach, that they were in talks and it wasn't going anywhere, took a long time, and eventually something got done, but them going and interviewing at any other place wasn't going to help them get more money from Michigan, which is they were talking about that this wouldn't be the way to go about trying to do that, because Michigan still may not pony up any more money just because you're going to do that. I guess I think what really intrigues me, number one, is the fact that you had a couple of weeks ago conversation with Michigan AD to talk about this contract. And after that conversation, you say, basically, be on the lookout, something's coming. Well, it's been 3 weeks since that conversation, and there's nothing here yet.
Yeah.
Nothing has been signed. No contract is ready. There's nothing. So the fact that you're going out and you're looking, and as this article that I read earlier too, that says, if you go out and you're looking, you're obviously looking because you think that you could get a better job. But my question to that would be, are the Detroit Pistons a team in the East that's a like, what were they, 9th place team in the East this year?
They would have been the 12th pick, I believe, in the draft.
And if
they didn't trade to the Clippers.
And that was with
Griffin.
a 39 and 43 record or something like that.
They were bad.
You're not good. You're under 500. Why would you leave a successful program that you're building at Michigan, that you built and are still building on, to leave them for an NBA team that's nowhere near necessarily being competitive?
This is where I was going to jump in with the reason why I don't think it's the former of what I mentioned with the, hey, I'm going to do this to try to get more money out of Michigan, is because Beilein's been there since 2007. Yes, he's been to 2 national championships, lost them both. I think the first one was to Louisville, then this last one to Villanova-Hova. But the thing why I feel like this is for real when it comes to John Beilein is this could be the perfect opportunity for him, because I don't think John Beilein cares that he's going to I'm going to be nice and say subpar team in the Detroit Pistons. The thing you got to think about is, like, I'll use an example. Everyone right now, down 2-0, is talking about LeBron James. Where's he going to go? Where's he going to go? Is he going to Houston? Is he going to Philadelphia? And the thing that NBA players or former NBA players bring up in these segments on ESPN, Fox News, everything, is the only way they can see him staying in Cleveland is basically, oh, does he want to uproot his family? Does he want to uproot his kids, or does he want him to go to the same high school he did in Akron, Ohio? Well, if we take that and apply it to this, I'm looking Ann Arbor on Google Maps at right now, if we took a drive from Ann Arbor to Detroit, 43 minutes. So it's not that long of a commute from, and I'm not saying that John Beilein's in Ann Arbor. He could be around the area. It's a close drive to Detroit. Doesn't have to move his family, doesn't have to shake up his life. He can keep that the same and make the jump to the NBA. And the thing that I think of is a lot of people will say, well, college coaches have not been successful in the NBA. But here, I'm going to give you one, and this is where I think John Beilein falls in, is one thing that people have said, is John Beilein known as a phenomenal recruiter, like I'll say a Calipari type recruiter, where he's bringing in big names left and right? No. He's been a guy, I'm going to recruit the smaller guys and then coach them up. Who knew when he was coming into college who Abdul Rahman was? Nobody. Who probably knew who Mo Wagner was? Nobody, unless you covered recruiting really deep and cared about recruiting really deep, because I know there's a pocket of people out there that follow recruiting every pulse every day. But the thing I'm going at is I compare it almost to Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens at Butler, probably because he was at Butler, and most people, unless you're a huge college basketball fan, couldn't find Butler on a map if you told them to. Go up to a random person on the street, show them a map of the United States, say, find Butler. They wouldn't be able to go, oh, it's in Indianapolis. They just wouldn't be able to. But he was able to bring in the guys he brought in and coach that team up to a national championship appearance. Was able to coach them up not just to 1, but 2 national championship appearances, much like John Beilein. That's why I'm kind of thinking, and maybe this is because we've seen it already, a coach like that who has coached subpar players compared to like the Kentuckys and everything up to a national championship Well, Brad Stevens is able to do that in Boston, but Boston, the thing that they have that Detroit doesn't have is they had Danny Ainge, and Danny Ainge helped Brad Stevens by getting him young talent like Jaylen Brown, like Terry Rozier, like Jason Tatum, guys that could work better with a Brad Stevens and then give you a Gordon Hayward and a Kyrie, although they were injured this year. I feel like that will be the closer mold or the closer way we would look at John Beilein in the NBA compared to those other ones that we feel like they're failing. I'm not saying he'd go to the Eastern Conference Finals, but I think he would have some sort of success in the NBA.
So you look at some of the recent guys who've gone to the NBA. Fred Hoiberg, one of the recent guys, he has not had success with the Chicago Bulls.
Bulls are a dumpster fire.
This last season was so bad. 27 and 55. Billy Donovan with OKC. He's done well. He's had success, but still not to the point that they want to be. They can't get over that hump.
Yeah.
Brad Stevens has done well. He's done well with Boston. You look at guys, though, in the past. Lon Kruger, he didn't do well with Illinois. You've got Calipari. Where was he again when he was in the NBA? He didn't do well either. I mean, two guys I think
Rick Pitino.
I don't think that they ever made the playoffs. I don't think Pitino had any playoff appearances with the team that he was with.
Pitino, I think, was Boston.
And here's a worry that if John Beilein went to the NBA, and let me get this.
By the way, New Jersey was Calipari, the New Jersey Nets.
Let me get this tweet out of the way from Woj. So he says, Detroit is interested in further conversations with former Toronto coach Dwayne Casey and Michigan coach John Beilein on Pistons head coaching job, league sources tell ESPN. Both coaches have met with the front offices already. So my whole thing is that do they want to go with a guy who what he coaches is fundamentals? What he coaches is fundamentals. And if you go to the NBA, they think, yeah, we've got that down already. We're not fundamental. We don't need I don't want to say they don't need the fundamentals, but they're past that. We're not kids where we need to, practice our passing. But a guy like Steve Kerr, who when he came in, he had never coached anywhere before. The Warriors were his first coaching gig, and God really looked out for him because he said, I like you to have immediate success. And that's what he had. But he started with fundamentals.
Well, that's Brad Stevens the same way.
Starting with fundamentals of, hey, make sure you have the right pass so that your guy's not fumbling with it and he can, spot up and have a good jumper. So all those types of things are important, but is he going to be received well by the players in the NBA? Not because of anything else, but because of if that's his coaching style where he's trying to get at fundamentals, he's going to be received well by college players, of course, because they're still progressing. They're still trying to change some things and grow into themselves and everything like that. NBA players are grown men for the most part. Actually, for the whole part. I mean, even if you are whatever age you are, 20, you're in the NBA, you're a man. But I think that
I'm a man. I'm 40.
Is that going to be something that maybe NBA players, like a guy like a Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond, who are currently with Detroit, are they gonna take well to that? Or would they be like, no, we need to do more? We're struggling. We need to do more than just fundamentals. Or would they say maybe we just need to go back to the fundamentals?
I mean, really, the two that kind of speak to me is there's three that kind of speak to me veteran-wise on the Pistons. And that's Reggie Jackson, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Drummond, because the only thing that they all have in common is they're the oldest veterans on this team.
Yeah.
You look at the rest of this team, Luke Kennard is a young kid.
Yes, he is.
You got Stan Johnson, the Manimal, is a younger kid. He's 22, although you call him a man. I would say 22 is young for NBA career because you don't hit your prime until 27, 28.
Young, but are you still a man? You're in the NBA
you're a
league.
Man,
you're a man to be playing in the NBA. That's what I'm saying. You may be a young man, but you're still a man.
NBA age 22 is young, and then you also have Henry Ellison, who's still a young kid in his NBA career. And I mean, kid's the wrong word; they're men, but I mean, like you said, young man. The thing I like most about Beilein, and this is Michigan fans will probably hate this because I am on the camp. Back to the original question, should he go to Detroit? Yeah, if I was John Beilein, I'd be making a beeline to Detroit. That's exactly. I'm going to use that joke.
Yeah, you love
until
it. You
I
love
just
it. I can
milk
tell
everything
you really
out
like
of it.
that a lot.
But I would be going to Detroit because I feel like he'll have success in Detroit because he's not like he's had jobs everywhere. He hasn't just been in Michigan the entire time, I don't believe. But I'm going to look up really quickly if he was, let's see, where was he born? So he's a New York guy. So he's not a Michigan guy. I mean, New York being that's where he was born, that's where he was raised. But he's been in Michigan since 2007. If you lived somewhere for a decade, I feel like you would have soaked in what it means to be that kind of a guy. He's a Michigan guy, and being close to Detroit can have that same kind of, hey, I'm coming into this job. Ann Arbor is close enough to Detroit. I'm the Detroit area. I'm the right coach for this job. And I love the fact that he's a fundamental guy. Another thing, I was reading an article, and they mentioned the point of like, oh, he's not a guy that's known for being a strong recruiter, but he is a coach that I'm going to make those changes mid-game. And to me, if I was a front office, that's what I would want. A guy that can work with young kids, because really, when you look at this landscape in the NBA, the Warriors did it. Boston has done it, although they got lucky because the Cavs gave them a gift in Kyrie Irving. But how do you build? You build through the draft. Steph Curry was drafted. Klay Thompson was drafted. Draymond Green was drafted. Yeah, they got KD through free agency, but that team, that championship team, was already built through the draft. Jason Tatum was drafted. Terry Rozier was drafted. Jaylen Brown was drafted. Built through the draft, that main young core. Detroit can do the same thing with John Beilein, and I would like a coach that's already like, hey, you know what? I know that first half wasn't good. Be a guy to preach the fundamentals, always be reminding his guys about those fundamentals, but then also be the coach to say, all right, we need to make this game plan change. We need to do this in the second half. And be that coach to make changes. Because I'm watching the playoffs now, Brandon, and the biggest thing in most games is who makes the halftime adjustment. Who makes it? The Celtics were good at that, especially at home. There's a reason why the Warriors come out of the gate in the third quarter like gangbusters, because they make that halftime adjustment, or they just turn it on, one of the two. But that is what I would want from my coach. Should he? I would say yes. But he doesn't have to, because Michigan is still, I would say, a cushy job for him because he's got a contract through 2021, and I don't see him getting fired before that.
I would say I would say no. I would say don't do it, because what we continue to kind of talk about is that he's this fundamentals coach. I think he's going to have greater success in college being able to work with those guys to really develop them, bring them out as much as they can, all their skills and everything like that, and I think help fine-tune that as well as he possibly can before they go to the NBA to be, those NBA players. So that's why I think college is the best spot for him. And according to Sportsbook, they actually list him as the number 3 favorite to get this job. And Dwayne Casey, I think, was number 1.
Do you know who the second guy was?
I don't know why I can't think of his name right now.
Because the thing I'll just say, because Dwayne Casey was in that Woj tweet, the reason why I would pick Beilein over Casey is, yes, Casey's been in the NBA. He's coached the Toronto Raptors. But do you want to bring in a college coach and be like, hey, he could be our version of Brad Stevens? Or would you bring in a coach, yeah, he's brought a team to the number 1 seed, but they keep getting beat by LeBron every single year? So there's that with Dwayne Casey where it's like, yeah, were you really coach of the year this year, or was it Brad Stevens? But also, yeah, you're a good regular season coach, but the playoffs is all that matters. Just getting to the playoffs is what you need.
Well, I'll be honest with you, is that you just said it. Getting to the playoffs is what you need, and right now they don't have it.
Yeah, they don't have it there.
I think going with Dwayne
Building
Casey,
the wall with Stan Van wasn't going to do it.
I think going with Dwayne Casey is the smarter choice. I think it's the smarter choice, the wiser choice, and quite honestly, the safer choice. But and sometimes the safe pick isn't the bad pick. But I think going with Dwayne Casey, because he does have that experience in the NBA, he does have that experience of being able to get to the playoffs and actually get there as a good seed so you know how to be able to win in the regular season. Yes, you need to still improve on what you're able to do in the playoffs, but I think that he could improve on that. So I think Dwayne Casey is the right pick. I think John Beilein, his best decision, I think, would be to stay in college. But it'll be really interesting if it comes down to those two guys as the finalists. It'll be really interesting to see what direction they end up going with, and if Beilein ends up accepting the job if it's offered to him, to see what Michigan might do to try and keep him.
Now, here's what I'm going to ask you, is before I throw you a curveball, I want to say one thing, and then I'll throw you my curveball to end it.
You always throw a curveball, and I should already be prepared.
The last thing I want to add is if he went to the NBA, two names that you mentioned were Billy Donovan and Fred Hoiberg, also college coaches that came over. The unique thing about them is, first, Fred Hoiberg, the second year I want to say he was here, he had the whole D-Wade, Jimmy Butler, Rondo being the voice of reason in that locker room, which is insane that Rajon Rondo was the voice of reason, but thank God we had him. He had that full debacle where front office said, we're getting rid of D-Wade, we're trading Jimmy Butler, we're letting Rajon Rondo go. Then this year he had marketing, but he had the issues with Bobby Portis and Nico. That team's a mess. That front office is a mess.
Yeah, so you also have a terribly weak front office.
I don't think it's all on, in that case, Fred Hoiberg. It's the front office's crap, too, with fire Garpax from the fans. With Billy Donovan, he had the whole, I'm doing well because I have KD and Russ, and KD's in Golden State. And then he had to deal with making Russ happy. Then this year had to deal with PG-13 and Melo, and he got an extension. But those situations have been vastly different because for Billy Donovan, it's been the situation. Fred Hoiberg, it's been the front office.
But can I say, though, is that those are things that's going to happen as a head coach that you have to work around? I mean, there's always adversity within a season.
I mean,
it doesn't matter.
Brad Stevens.
It doesn't matter how that adversity happens, whether you lose a player, they go down, or you lose everyone that's good, or you're just the Cleveland Cavaliers and you only have one good player
with all your young players.
So I think it's one of those things where it's kind of instilled in you as a coach, or it's not. You either have it where you know how to work around it, and you know how to make the adjustments, and you know the people to bring in, and you know the guys to play in the right situations at the right time, or you don't. And I think that I'm not saying that Fred Hoiberg does not. I think Fred Hoiberg would have been much better suited in college. I think he's a college coach. I don't think that he's an NBA coach. He's a nice guy, but he's not an NBA coach. Billy Donovan, I think, is an NBA coach. He's obviously a great, outstanding college coach, but he's a coach who has showed that he can coach in the NBA. And now a lot of people, and they're already telling me to go screw off, that are Bulls fans, saying that he's got nothing to work with. Yes and no, but I mean, sometimes you have to, try and get creative. But I think that, again, Beilein is one of those guys that he would just thrive more in college. I don't know if we'd ever see him thrive in the NBA.
So here's the curveball I was going to ask you to end this segment before we go on to Grayson Allen. Do you or have you thought about, let's say Beilein makes the beeline for Detroit and he's out of town. Who does Michigan hire? Or who do they go after? Have you thought about that at all?
No, because I don't see Beilein leaving. Now I don't need to think about it.
Let me throw out a name and see what you think, little reaction style. Thad Matta. If John Beilein leaves, I call up Thad Matta.
He's really the only one available. He's one of the only ones available right now. And it makes sense because he knows the conference, he knows the talent.
Ohio State fans would be so angry, and I'd love it.
But he knows the situation. He would probably be one of the best fits in terms of just the Big Ten.
Oh, man, that would feed so much rivalry back into the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry at basketball. I got one other, and this one's if Thad Matta said no. If John Beilein leaves, Thad Matta says no. This is a guy that I believe is interviewing for one of the NBA jobs, but I don't think he's going to get it. He's an assistant with the Miami Heat. He has history with the Michigan program, Juwan Howard. He was with the Fad 5 team. He's been an assistant under Eric Spoelstra since 2013. Yeah, he might want an NBA job, but hey, if he doesn't get one, why not entice him over? The question is with him is how do you feel? Because some people have that stigma with former players being NBA head coaches before they prove themselves.
I feel like that would be a stretch. I feel like on him it would be quite the stretch for Michigan if Beilein were to leave to go and try and get him. I think a guy like Thad Matta would be much more realistic to try and go after.
And those are the two guys that right now I can only think about, because if John Beilein does leave, he's putting the Wolverines in a tough spot. Putting them in a real tough spot, because most of the coaches that were fired or let go, they've already been let go, and they've found jobs somewhere else. But this is where do you have any final thoughts before I kick it down?
I'm good.
Okay.
I've got it.
This is where you guys come in. Let us know down below. Should John Beilein leave for the Detroit Pistons? What would he be like, and how would he succeed or not succeed as the head coach of the Detroit Pistons? And if he does leave, what happens to the Michigan Wolverines and their basketball program? Who do they hire? Who would you want them to hire? Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Let's move on, though, into our next topic, Brandon. And actually, we are going from, I believe, we're going from the Detroit Pistons to a former Detroit Piston when they went on one of their, also a former Bull, by the way, but a former Detroit Piston when they were making their championship runs in the early to mid to late 2000s. And here's what Rip Hamilton had to say on CBS Sports. So he was asked, when it comes to the NBA draft, has anyone jumped out to you, surprised you, someone you think we need to keep an eye on? And here's what his response was. Grayson Allen. They had a workout in LA, and a lot of NBA execs, they had about 100 of them there. What I'm hearing from some of my guys that are connected to a lot of teams is that this guy who really impressed them, he plays with the heart that you need to play with. He has that pit bull mentality. They have this drill where you have to shoot 25 threes, and he knocked down 20 out of 25. Everyone knows how athletic he is. He's off the charts with the athletic ability. Everyone projected him to go anywhere from 20 to 30. This is a guy that could sneak into the top 15 to 20. He's impressed a lot of scouts. He's impressed me just by watching some of his tape. I think he's a guy that can really move up in the NBA draft. End quote. Here's what I'm going to ask you, Brandon. How high will Grayson Allen be drafted?
Well, first of all, I just want to let you know that the Oakland Athletics selected Kyler Murray.
Did they?
They did.
Nice.
So
we were talking about that last week.
we were. So
I wouldn't want to play for Oakland. I'll stay with Texas A&M.
So how?
Because I don't think he'll go. I don't think he'll get top 15.
Top 15 is a real.
That means he's a lottery pick.
Top 15 is a real stretch with Grayson Allen. I think that he's still between 20 and 30. And the reason that I think he's between 20 and 30 is because, Ricky, we've seen Grayson Allen. We saw Grayson Allen this past year. Yes, live in person.
He played really well.
We could reach out and touch him. We couldn't, but
reach out and touch me.
But he played extremely well. Like you said, he played extremely well. And Grayson Allen has these stretches where he just turns it on and he lights it up. And he lit it up that night. And he was so good. And they needed him to be so good because that was the night that Marvin Bagley took a finger to the eye and left at the very beginning of the first half. Like maybe a couple minutes in. So they needed Grayson Allen. He's an energy guy. He is absolutely a passionate energy guy. But he will disappear sometimes. There are games where Grayson Allen, you're not even sure if he was on the floor for 20 minutes. And also, we talk about the guys like the Trae Youngs. We talk about the guys like the Colin Sextons. What we can certainly say about Grayson Allen is he's not a true point guard. And has Grayson Allen already capped off what he's going to be? And why I brought up the other two is because we don't believe that they're, rightfully so, anywhere near what they're going to end up being 5 years down the road. Grayson Allen, what you see right now may be what you get.
And that's one thing where I'm looking at the top 15 of the NBA draft. I don't see a single team that I would feel comfortable taking him in the top 15, where I feel like top 10 for sure, no way he goes in the top 10. Like Charlotte, I wouldn't take him there. The Clippers, I wouldn't take him at either of their picks. Denver, I wouldn't take him at 14. Then I kind of go down 15 through 20, that's where I feel like if he's going to rise, that's the highest he'll go. But someone's going to have to take a stab on him. In my mind, right now, I think either two things will happen for Grayson Allen. Right now, I came up with my first draft of our mock draft that we're going to have on the fast break. And I'll let you know about this now because it's probably going to change by Friday. But right now, I have Grayson Allen in the second round. I actually have it to where there's a certain team that actually trades into the second round, like gives up cash or a future second just to grab him in the second round. Because I feel like if he's in the second round, a team will do that. A team with championship pedigree will say, we need this kid. Or a young team that's like, we need this kid. Let's give away a future second, or do what the Bulls and Warriors did with Jordan Bell, where the whatever team's draft pick it is, hey, we'll just give you cash. Give us that pick, and we'll take Grayson Allen. But if he's going to go in the first round, I have three teams back to back to back where I could see him going. 26 to Philly, 27 to Boston, 28 to Golden State. And originally, I had him slotted in at Golden State because that to me would be a dream for him. It's a team that loves to shoot the three. He gets to go to the best thing about the Warriors is their environment. Festa Ezeli today was on Colin Cowherd, and when he was talking about his time with the Warriors, he said the best part about it is he's like, that locker room, it's just fun to play basketball. And they just look like they're having fun. And like it makes you feel like I'm having fun out there. Which part of it is when you're winning, you're having fun. But I mean, that's what life is. I feel like he'd be able to fit in at Golden State. He'd be a better younger version of Nick Young. That's what I feel like. Because he can shoot the three. He'd be a two guard who has some point guard tendencies. But the thing I like him for either one of those three, mainly Boston or Golden State, yeah, he's had his problems in the past, tripping players. With the right coach, Brad Stevens, Steve Kerr, or Brett Brown maybe, but more Brad Stevens, Steve Kerr, he can be coached. And also, as a freshman, he has championship experience. Yeah, it's only the NCAA championship, but he has that experience to where, hey, I can bring this kid in. He's not a freshman, and he has that pedigree. I can bring him in and not have to worry about him fading away in the playoffs. He can help us and maybe give us some quality minutes off the bench with my already playoff-ready team.
So, Ricky, here's the thing that worries me with Grayson Allen, too. His 15-16 season at Duke was outstanding. Mm-hmm. He ended it, he averaged 21.6 points per game. He was just lighting it up. He was just all over the place in a good way. The 2 years after that, he dropped down to, I think, 15 and 14 or 14 and 15 points per game. Huge drop-off. Less games started. He started 10 less games the next year, and I believe maybe played in one less game the next year.
You said 2015-16?
15-16 was his best season.
Okay.
16-17, big drop-off. Mm-hmm. And then 17-18, I think he maybe came back just a little bit. But he went down significantly from where he was in 15-16. A huge drop-off. Again, I know that he did not start the same amount of games the next year in 16-17. But, I mean, a complete huge drop-off in production. That's not comforting.
I mean, it's not comforting when you say that. But here's the thing I think of, and I'm doing the research right now to see if it fits. So let's go back to that good year you said, 15-16. And if I look at that Duke roster, they had Luke Kennard, who was a freshman. I love saying it that way, by the way. They had Brandon Ingram, who was a freshman. They had Marshall Plumlee was one of their captains. But really, like when I look at that team, Luke Kennard, Brandon Ingram, Grayson Allen. That was his sophomore year after he won the national championship the year before. Brandon Ingram was probably the number one guy on that team. Grayson Allen was not covered up. He could be either 2 or 3 on that team. Then I go to 2016-2017. That roster consisted of Luke Kennard was there still. Brandon Ingram was in the NBA. But it's basically Harry Giles didn't play much, but he was on that team. Jason Tatum was a freshman on that team. Yet again, J-Tay the main guy, Luke Kennard, bigger role. Grayson Allen falls a little bit. And then this year, this Duke team was stacked. This Duke team, Gary Trent, Trayvon Duval, Marvin Bagley, Wendell Carter. Too many cooks. Too many cooks in the kitchen. It's
you think that's it?
I think that's it. I know. Maybe not the 16-17, but definitely this year was Marvin Bagley and Wendell Carter were the 1-2 on that team, the best players on that team. That's why they're going to be drafted in the lottery, maybe both of them in the top 10, depending on if Wendell falls or not. But most people are trending him upward. And then you also had Gary Trent and Trayvon Duval, who were really good for that team. And Coach K had to find a way to make them all work. That's the only reason I can think, because Grayson Allen, to me, when I watched him play this season and when we watched him live, it wasn't like whoa, this dude lost a step from those years. It was just there were so many good players, and his stats went down a little bit because they were going to someone else. That's what I would think it is.
Well, when I saw him play in that game, and that game was against Michigan State, I thought, and I think, and Dave was with us as well. I mean, I think we could have probably all pegged him, and maybe already did peg him for like Player of the Year.
But think about it.
Player of the Year right here.
Here's the thing to think about also. Marvin Bagley was injured, like you said. He got injured very early in that game after getting poked in the eye. So that also helped. Not having Bagley out there, all right, that's one less player that is going to take points away from anybody on the court. But two, even if Marvin Bagley played significant minutes in that game, I believe that was game 1 of the year for Duke, or game 2 of the year. I think it was game 1 for Duke. So for me, Marvin Bagley wasn't the player that he was towards the end of the year. Wendell Carter wasn't the player he was at the end of the year. As this team started to mature over the year or over the season, Grayson Allen took more of a backseat role. Not saying that's bad, but he let like the Bagley, Wendell Carter take the front, and I'm just going to help the team any way I can.
But I guess my whole thing is that I don't need him to go out there and score 30 a game.
No, you don't.
And he's not going to, but when you drop off 6 or 7 points in production, that's huge. And you don't want to be that guy that is really showing up for some games and then just disappears, which is what he did at times down the stretch. And yes, Duke was fortunate that they had the Bagleys, the Carters, to be able to pick up the production and keep Duke going and in those games. But as good as Grayson is with certain things, he's got the size, 6'4", 6'5", he's got the size. Size is there, no problem with that. He's a really good spot-up 3-ball shooter. He's also really good without the ball. I think that he's got some really, really good tools in that sense. He's a poor defender when it comes down to it, and he needs to get better there. But he also cannot be the guy who just goes. He cannot be the guy who's on the floor for 22 minutes and has 7 points. And I'm not saying that's going to be him by any stretch, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to get that reputation of you could be on the floor for 25 minutes and have 25 points, or you could be on the floor for 25 minutes and have 10.
The only thing that bugs me from his stats, and I'm only looking at 2015 to 2015, 2016, and then this past year. I'm omitting the 15-17 because I'm looking from where you started to where you are now. The points per game doesn't bug me because 15 points per game, if you're giving that to me, I'm not saying he's going to do that off the bench, but even if you're giving me 13 off the bench as a Warrior Celtic team, I'm good with that.
No, I'm
good with that.
That's good, but he's doing that as a starter and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the role is different. But I'm not saying that points is everything. That's certainly not it. But for a guy like Grayson Allen, where guess what? Points are going to be mostly everything when you're a 3-ball shooter.
Well, that's the thing that worries me. So looking through it, I'll go right through. The points don't bother me at 15.5, but like you said, that's at starter minutes. Does that go down if he's not at starter minutes, also against greater competition at the next level? I mean, it's not great that you're assist to steal it's almost 1-to-1, but it's favoring you're turning the ball over like almost half a time more than you're stealing the ball. The thing I like is that he went up by almost an assist a game. I would almost like that to go up a little bit more, but I get you're going to be more of my 2-guard that's a spot-up shooter, maybe with some point guard tendencies if I need you to handle the ball in any situation. I mean, the free throw shooting is up. The overall field goal percentage is down, but mainly that's because the 2 percentage is around the same. The thing that worries me is the 3-point percentage, because 2015, 2016, he's averaging 6 attempts per game. He's nailing 41, almost 42%. That's great. That's what I want to see. But then it's like, all right, I'm giving you 1, almost 2 more attempts a game, and you're dropping to 37, which I think is more towards league average. I know we looked at that last week, but that's what worries me the most. With the more 3-point attempts I give you, your percentage drops from almost 42 to 37 from beyond the arc. And that would be my concern from a guy who, he hit 20 of 25 threes in a gym with no one guarding him. But also, I believe Jamal Murray hit like 98 of 100 threes for Boston in a gym with no one guarding him. And that's nothing against Jamal Murray, but how's he been doing for the Nuggets? Are the Nuggets a playoff team? That one drill doesn't say everything about a player at the next level.
And a guy that Grayson Allen has been compared to is Eric Gordon from the Houston Rockets. And
Great 6-man.
And I was just going to say, and Eric Gordon this year in 69 games, 18 points, about 2 assists, shooting almost 36% from 3. I could take that. I could take that. If he could do that, if Grayson Allen could do that at the next level, I'd be happy with that. But my biggest concern when it comes down to Grayson Allen is the tools are there, but it's the consistency. It is the consistency to carry that from game to game. If you are the 6-man, can you carry that energy, which he most likely could, because he's, like I said at the beginning of this segment, he's an energy and passion guy. He's exactly what you'd want in the type of 6-man coming off the bench. But can you carry that in terms of your production that you give your team off the bench?
And that's why, for me, the 2 teams that the 3 that I'm going to go back to, the 3 that I mentioned earlier, the 76ers, the Boston Celtics, and the Golden State Warriors, because I think either of those 3 teams, 26 or 28, that's really where I feel like as high as Grayson Allen will go. And those will actually be, to me, the best 3 situations for him, because, I mean, I'll start from worst to best. The worst situation out of the 3, I would say, is the Philadelphia 76ers, because, he'll get to play with guys like Joel Embiid, who's also an energy guy. He'll get to play with Ben Simmons, who's one of the up-and-coming players, and I know people are going to get mad I call him up-and-coming, but he's most likely going to be one of the best players in the NBA once the LeBrons, the KDs are all said and done. And then you have also Markelle Fultz, if he ever decides to actually play basketball like he did at the end of the year, not like he did at the beginning of the year. But the only reason why I would put them in is for Grayson Allen, and I don't want to knock Brett Brown, but I kind of do. He's not the same kind of coach as Steve Kerr or Brad Stevens. And we won't find this out until after the draft. Now, if the 76ers got LeBron James, then it would be a beautiful situation for Grayson Allen, because he can just be coached by LeBron James, and kind of LeBron can, I'm not saying literally take him under the wing, but he can learn from the best player in the NBA. Then there's Boston. That would be my number 2. Great coach who's going to coach him up, and he works well with young players. He doesn't have to be anything special right off the bat. They have Marcus Smart if they bring him back, because he's an RFA this year. They have Terry Rozier, who is still under contract for 1 more year, another young player. But at shooting guard, it would be him and Gordon Hayward. So, they have Marcus Smart and Terry Rozier to kind of put in there, depending on when Kyrie's back, how they do that. But they can fit him into that 2 guard, and he'll just be on the depth chart the only other shooting guard than Gordon Hayward. Then there's my best spot, and that would be Golden State. Not only do you get Steve Kerr, not only do you get guys like KD, Klay Thompson, Steve Curry. Like I said before, or Steph Curry. Why did I say Steve Curry?
Steve Curry.
Steph Curry.
Okay.
His younger brother, younger than his other brother. That's Steve Curry. Seth, Steve, and Steph. Those are the three Curry. No one talks about Steve Curry enough. No one does. It's kind of like Cooper Manning. No one talks about Coop. No one talks about Stephen Curry enough, but they're there. Steph and Curry, though, you have those three guys, also Draymond Green, so you don't have to be the main starter, but I just feel like he would be a better version of Nick Young. I know Nick Young has been not Swaggy P, but Uncle P this year, but Swaggy P's coming off a contract. Just replace Nick Young with a younger version in Grayson Allen, and basically he could then be that kind of, I kind of want to say like some sort of a six-man, but not really the six-man, because Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston are still on that team. But if they need, like, oh, Klay Thompson goes down or Klay Thompson needs a rest, let me throw Grayson Allen out there, much like they're doing with Nick Young right now. That's what I think would be his best option, and where I hope he gets drafted if he goes in the first round.
I think, to go back to the original question again, though, do you think that I could see him at 15, go all the way up to 15,
No.
be a lottery pick? No, there's too many questions.
No.
There's too many question marks around him for him to be that high to go 15.
Well, it's not just that. To me, it's not really questions. It's just, if I'm selecting someone...
they're questions for me.
No. There are questions. I'm not doubting that. But for me, it's not if there's questions about them. To me, if I am drafting you in the lottery, 99.9% of the time, if I'm drafting you in the lottery, I'm expecting you to start.
Well, yeah.
And I don't want Grayson Allen to be my starting two guard. And that's what I'm saying. I feel like Grayson Allen, especially in his rookie year, would be more fit to a six-man bench role than a starting two guard right out of the gate.
But that's also why I think that the comment is kind of crazy. Because then
Rip Hamilton?
Yeah, because you're then making the assumption that Grayson Allen's going to be an NBA starter, which I don't think anybody, probably nobody, ever thought that he was going to be an NBA starter from the get-go.
And it could be, to be honest, and I'll go back to the original point where he says the fact that he's impressing a lot of scouts and a lot of execs, you got to separate just because you impress an NBA exec doesn't mean they're going to say, boom, let's take him at 13. Like, yeah, sometimes that happens, but it might be the case of, hey, you know what? Maybe he's fallen to, and I'm not going to say fallen because he's not supposed to go in the top 15 for me, but let's say he goes to like 23 in Indiana and some team goes, hey, let's trade up for him. I could see that happening. To where between 15 and 20 or 15 and 25, if a team that's back or a team that's not in the first round goes, hey, I like him, let me trade up for him, I just don't see that happening. I just see him going straight through. He'll go 26 through 28. Those will be the teams I look at. And then if not, he's a second-round talent to me. Mm-hmm. And even if he's in the second round, I don't think he's going to be one of those second-rounders that's like, well, we drafted him, he's out of the league in a couple years. He might be one of those second-rounders where we look at it and it's like, wow, like a Draymond Green-esque in the sense of we look at him on a team and go, man, he's not a guy that's going to be your Steph Curry's, your Klay Thompson's, your Kevin Durant's, but he's a really good role player for that team off of the bench, though, where Draymond's a starter. Grayson would be off the bench in a six-man role. That's what I would think would be his cap in the NBA.
I agree with you. I don't really see Grayson Allen unless it was a situation like where with the Chicago Bulls and you have certain guys. 22? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about a spot that you're at. I'm talking about a situation like the Bulls this past year. Guys who were on that team were starting that you would never see them starting for other NBA teams. It's because the Bulls are in such disarray all over the place that you had to start. That's the only type of situation that I would see Grayson Allen starting. Not because he's not talented, but because that's just not necessarily going to be the role that he's going to be asked to play when it comes to the NBA.
Like, let me throw out a name for you. Like, oh, here's a good one because Bulls fans were talking about giving him a contract. Like Sean Kilpatrick. Remember when we got him and he played 9 games really well, won us some games we probably should have lost, and that's why we're... I'm not getting on that. This is the Primetime Podcast, not the Bulls Podcast. But any final thoughts on Grayson Allen before I blow a gasket about my Bulls?
No, I'm good.
This is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think about Grayson Allen. How high do you think he'll be drafted? What do you think about Rip Hamilton's comments about Grayson Allen? Where do you think he'll go? What teams would you like to see him on? Because he's kind of a guy with what range I think he'll be in. We don't necessarily have to talk where he'll go. It's more of what team you'll want to see him on and where he fits in best for you. So let us know all that down below in the comment section. But Brandon, let's end the podcast talking about a little college football. Not a college football, but we're talking college football here to end the podcast. Talking a little Florida State. And there was an article on ESPN that basically said a little inside, they said inside Florida State's complicated quarterback battle. So the question that I wanted to bring up and the question I'm going to ask you to start the segment is basically this. DeAndre Francois, coming off an injury of last year, injured against Alabama, was injured all year. Will DeAndre Francois be the starting quarterback for the Seminoles this year?
I think yes. I think the answer has to be yes. If you have a healthy DeAndre Francois, that's got to be the guy that you go with. And the reason being is because look at what he did for you 2 years ago. That's something that you cannot forget. And those stats again, because I know we're all about, stats. Over 3,300 yards, 3,350 to be exact, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in 13 games. And then, of course, you play against Alabama. You go down towards the end of the game that you're already losing. Heartbreaking. But what DeAndre Francois is able to bring to the table, I think, is more than what James Blackman would be able to bring. While James Blackman had some games where it looked like he was finally starting to come into his own, he still had too many mistakes. He's not what DeAndre Francois is. Though. Oh, I know.
Okay.
I know.
I just want to throw that out there.
DeAndre Francois was also a freshman when he
redshirt freshman.
Yeah.
Well, there's he's technically a sophomore if he's a redshirt freshman.
I know, but
I'm just saying.
freshman.
I'm just saying. He had a year of experience. That's all I'm saying.
So, I think that when you look at James Blackman, and this is what I said back when this was all happening, Blackman was going to be the starter. He's about this big. He's not able to do this. He's not able to do the same types of things that DeAndre Francois is able to do. And Francois is able to, I think, move a little bit more mobily. With the football, he's not going to, hold under center. I think he's just better at that. He brings also, I think, a better threat behind center. And their defenses aren't going to be able to stack the box against the run. They're definitely going to have to drop back. They cannot be all in on, stacking the box because, you've got a weapon there behind center. My whole thing is that, again, if you have a healthy DeAndre Francois, guy who's not in any trouble, nothing with, marijuana that he's holding for his girlfriend, I think that he's got to be your guy because he gives you the best chance to win.
Now, here's the thing I was kind of thinking about. And the marijuana thing I kind of want to get to in a little bit. Not necessarily because he wasn't charged for anything, but I want to get on that because of Willie Taggart coming in, DeAndre Francois not being a guy that Willie Taggart recruited, and if that means anything. But the thing I want to get to first with me is the big question that I have about DeAndre Francois, because when you look at the stats, they're not even close. DeAndre Francois through the air, almost over 3,000 yards. And the thing I like the most, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He was well above in his touchdown to interception ratio. James Blackman. just over 2,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Almost the same touchdowns. However, he threw more interceptions. And when it comes to running the ball, they're virtually opposite sides of the world, where Blackman had negative 39 yards all year, whereas DeAndre Francois in his last full season had almost 200 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. Now, here's the question I have with that. The thing that's going to decide for me a little bit of if DeAndre Francois is going to be my quarterback is basically, how are you coming back from the knee injury? Because if he was a traditional, I'm under center, or if he's a shotgun guy that's a pocket guy, then I'm a little less worried about that. Because, yeah, you need to plant your legs and use your legs to throw with power, but you don't necessarily need to come back from the knee injury as strong as you are as a mobile quarterback. With him having that mobile threat, is he still going to be that little bit of a mobile threat with the knee injury coming back from it? Is he basically going to be Adrian Peterson where I don't have to worry about it? Or is he going to be on the other side where it's like, wow, he is just not the same player since the knee injury? That's going to be told through the spring. That's going to be told through training camp. We're not going to have that answer right now. But to me, that is the biggest question is, what are you going to be post-knee injury? Because the run game is it's not Michael Vick level. You're not running it most of the time. That's not the main bread and butter. But it is a little bit a part of your game if you're DeAndre Francois.
I think that what's going to be really interesting is the fact that Willie Taggart has not coached either of these guys. Mm-hmm. These are not his guys. He did not recruit them. They're not attached to him.
No biases.
And there's no biases. So virtually, they both have a fighting chance to be the starting quarterback. And the system that Willie Taggart runs is also much different than what Jimbo Fisher did. Mm-hmm. Whereas Jimbo Fisher was very, very complex, very this, very that. There's much more simplified with Willie Taggart. Much less complicated, but it's much faster. Because it's much faster and they run more plays, they at Oregon they ran, I think, almost 10 more plays per game than Florida State did. That, again, is something that I think goes in favor to DeAndre Francois. I think that, especially since he already had a year under his belt, or kind of...
Yeah, it's a redshirt freshman.
Yeah. So
he was still on the sideline. He was still in the building that first true freshman year.
But it really, now that wouldn't matter. But as a guy who I think they both now are virtually at the same spot, because Francois has a year that he played, a full year that he played, and Blackman has pretty much a full year that he played.
And both of them have to learn Willie Taggart's playbook.
And now and again, like I mentioned, they're both on the kind of the level playing field. But with what I saw of DeAndre Francois, he's a guy who I think is going to be able to handle that a little bit better, who's going to be able to move with the quickness and the speed of the offense a little bit better than a guy like Blackman will. Blackman, again, he has some really good traits about him. He can make some really strong throws, and we saw him make some really strong throws in certain games last year. Again, you're being thrown into the fire. You couldn't have expected really anything from Blackman. You just had a hope that he was going to at least be able to keep you in games, and that's what he was able to do as they ended up going. What did they go, like
7-6?
Okay, 7-6.
With their
I was going to say like 5-7 or something.
With their bowl game, though.
Okay, 7-6. So definitely the worst season there under Jimbo Fisher, but I think there's going to be, with James Blackman, he'll be more prone to mistakes and possible interceptions or a fumble than a guy like DeAndre Francois would be.
And let's put it this way, because I just looked it up. They were 3-6 until they won their last 4 against Delaware State, Florida, Louisiana Monroe, and Southern Miss. So 3 of those games, cupcake games. I'll give you the Florida one, even though Florida wasn't the same Florida team that we were used to, and we kind of knew they were going to get their coach fired at that point, but they really turned it around that last 3 games and then the bowl game to go 7-6. Here's a question that I was thinking about, because I'm also looking at, they also have, I believe, he is a sophomore heading into this one. They have a senior and a sophomore, but I'm looking more at the sophomore because even in our comment section for last year's Florida State preview, a lot of commenters talked about this kid, running back Cam Akers, where, watch out for this guy. He's going to be a playmaker. And yeah, he was 70 yards shy of 1,000 yards, which is no chip change. 181 carries, only 7 touchdowns, though. And I know most people are going to go, Ricky, as a freshman, 7 touchdowns is not bad. I just feel like his numbers might improve this year. But the question I was going to ask you is, what are the odds, and is it crazy to say that Willie Taggart goes with a dual quarterback, where it's like, you know what? No one's won the job. We're going to play both of you evenly in different situations. Because we've seen some teams go to that, and it works for some teams. Could it work for Willie Taggart, or will he, if de facto, you're the number one guy, you're our only guy?
I don't know. I don't necessarily know if for the most part, I don't think I necessarily like the dual quarterback type of thing.
Because it messes up the rhythm?
I think that it can. There's certain situations and certain plays, maybe certain games where it could be successful, but I don't think that is a recipe for a season of success. So I think that you have to fall with one guy. You have to go with one guy who's going to know that he's going to be the starter. He's going to know that no matter the situation, he's going to be in there. I think that's what's going to be the most important thing. And for you as a coach, you want to be able to know that you're just putting in one guy, and you don't have to worry about this back and forth. And is this going to be an issue that this guy's in at this point? This guy's, am I putting this guy in the right situation? Should it really be this guy? No, you don't want to do that to yourself. Especially in your first season where you're just trying to get back on the right path with Florida State after a really down year last season. You go with one quarterback, and that's going to be your guy. That's going to be your guy. That's going to be your top dog, the guy that you know you're going with, no matter what the game, who the opponent, that's who you go with. And I think, like I said, we've seen some dual quarterbacks where that they can be successful. Like when Alabama did it with, who was it, Blake Sims and Jake Coker. Like they had different situations where it worked. Yeah. But then we also saw with Florida last year where you had Felipe Franks, and then you had
Everett Golden. It wasn't Everett Golson. He was Florida State. Zaire Smith? No, not Smith. No. I'm going to look it up. You keep going with your point. I'll look it up.
But the point is that it wasn't necessarily a dual quarterback, but it's, okay, you've done well for these 3 games. Or no, I'm going to put you in. You did okay for these 3 games, but not good enough. So now I'm going to put it Zaire Smith. No,
Zaire Smith is NBA draft. I think it's Malik Zaire.
Malik Zaire, you got it. I don't know why we just said Zaire Smith, and I just said Zaire Smith.
It's because as I'm looking it up, and actually now I just got
Malik
to it.
Zaire.
Like I said, Zaire Smith, and I'm like, no, I've been talking NBA draft so much.
We've had him on the mind.
That's the name that I come up to, and then as I'm looking it up, I'm like, I think it's Malik Zaire. I'm like, I'm going to make sure before I dart that one out of the mouth. But yeah, it was Malik Zaire.
So Malik Zaire, that's correct. But they had, back and forth. Zaire starts.
And there was also Little Del Rio as well.
Yes. And then Felipe Franks comes in. Like that. Florida, you already sucked last year. This is just not making it much better.
Dan Mullen's going to have that a lot, hopefully centered down.
Felipe Franks had an outstanding 60-yard game-winning pass, Hail Mary pass that probably shouldn't have been caught, but it was. But
against Tennessee, man.
But again, that's and it just everything went against Tennessee last year. But that's not something that you want to work yourself into that sort of situation. That does not help the player. It does not help the team. The fans will go crazy. And as a head coach, you've really just kind of put yourself in a tough spot.
Let me ask you this then. We'll get to what I said we were going to get to. The whole marijuana situation. Although he wasn't charged, holding it for a girlfriend, what do you think of that whole situation with DeAndre Francois and now with Willie Taggart and Florida State?
I think it's stupid. I think that the fact that the police had been monitoring his house for 2 months because they believed something was going on, that's not good. I don't care if it's yours, if you're holding it for a girlfriend, if you're holding it for your mom. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you are on a team that's going to need you, that you need to have your head straight and know what's important. And that's this conversation that Willie Taggart had with him, is that, I have certain expectations of you on this team. And if you're going to be a team leader, we need you to act like a team leader. And that's the conversation that he needs to have with him. Everyone makes mistakes. College kids will make mistakes. That's a mistake that he made. I think that if he learns from that, knows that these are not the types of things that I can be doing, certainly not caught doing. I think that what he needs to do now is learn from that, grow, and become then that vocal team leader, and then with examples of good things that he's doing then to make sure that people know, guys, I'm all in on this team, and I'm not going to do anything to jeopardize that. Nor do you want to do anything to jeopardize a starting job potentially, because if that's something that happens during the year, if you're caught with something like that during the year, or DUI or this or that, that's a potential suspension that you're going to get from your head coach.
And I'm glad you bring that up.
You're going to be out of a game that your team may need you very badly in what could be a very tight race.
Well, and I'm glad you bring that up, because for me, it's not like you were a part of that. Yeah, you weren't charged. You're not going to be our starting quarterback. No, it's not like that. But the thing that I worry about is you've got Willie Taggart, new head coach. He's going to have to, especially in this first year, not change the culture. Like, it's not something bad, but he's going to have to instill his own culture, because his Florida State team, his Florida State locker room, hell, his Florida State practices are going to be different than Jimbo Fisher. He's got to make this Florida State team his and have his expectations on these players, basically. And the thing I worry about is, I'm not necessarily saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying, like, oh, DeAndre Francois is a bad apple and yada, yada, yada. What I'm saying is, what if there's another slip-up, even if it's an accident, for whatever reason? Willie Taggart, we've said it before, I didn't recruit you. Yes, you have that coach, young man situation of, like, I want to be here for you. I'm here to help you grow. What you hear every coach talk about with their football players, mostly it's, I build this relationship. They're like my own sons half the time, or 75% of the time. Like, look at the relationship we saw with Tom Herman and his guys, especially at Houston. And what I worry is that this learning moment for DeAndre Francois, but does it put him on a short leash to where I'm Willie Taggart, I'm just getting to know you, we've already gotten off on a negative footing, and now the next problem, because you're on a short leash, it might not be, even if it's not an NCAA suspension, does it lead something from Willie Taggart and the football team to then have disciplinary action that wouldn't have been there if you didn't have this, and whatever the next one, if there is a next one, not saying there is, but if there is a next time, that would have been the first time, that would have been the warning, and basically that you used up your warning with a coach that doesn't quite know you yet.
Well, I think that you have for DeAndre Francois. If anything were to happen during the regular season, I think that he's putting his starting job in jeopardy. I think he really is. And Willie Taggart, again, he basically said to him, and here's a quote, he's got to be smart about who he's around and what he's around and make good decisions. I advise him to just make sure he's around his teammates all the time. So
can I ask you a question really quick?
Sure.
Is it a Jimbo Fisher situation? And I only ask this because, are we going to see less and less of situations, not necessarily like this, but situations at all like this at Florida State, because Willie Taggart might have a different view on it than Jimbo Fisher? Because this is not the only time we've heard a Florida State player in the news for something under Jimbo Fisher, but number two, it's probably a lot more tame and a lot less serious than the allegations, and not charges because he was never charged, but the allegations that was against one of his other former quarterbacks in Jameis Winston. is this down the road after we get done with the season, after we get done with like 3 years maybe, do we look back on it and say, it wasn't a DeAndre Francois problem, it wasn't a Jameis Winston problem, it was a Jimbo Fisher problem, and he just let the guys almost do whatever they want, and Willie Taggart had a better control on his football team?
Every coach is going to be different in how they're going to handle a situation. I think you look at what happened with Alabama when one of the guys, I think we talked about it last off season, one of the guys was caught, he had a gun on him, stuff
Cam
like
Robinson.
that. Yes. And there was no suspension that came down for him. And you're going, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? There's no suspension. Guys caught with a gun and there's no suspension. There's another coach who could have been Willie Taggart. Who knows? Maybe he says, that's a bit much for me. You're gonna be suspended. Maybe he doesn't. But every coach is going to handle a situation differently. Every coach is going to handle a situation in the way that they've had success handling it before. Willie Taggart, this is not his first coaching gig. He's been, obviously Oregon,
Southern Florida.
He's dealt with all situations all over the place. You think that there are things happening that we're not hearing about? Absolutely. This is not uncommon. Yeah. Guys do stupid things.
Kids do stupid shit,
all the times. I mean, I'm sure there's parties and this and that and the other thing that guys go to get caught at, this or that and the other thing. And what their coaches to a point, and it's to a certain extent should be, not putting it out there in the public because they're supposed to be trying to protect their players.
Let's put it this way, and I'll use this as an example, and I hope that you're not mad at me for saying this. I never got this way because when I went to college, I was a commuter student, and number two, I was a lame-o and just went home most of the time and played World of Warcraft.
You were
and video games. But I've heard stories from you where it's although it was I went to parties, it wasn't every party you went to, nothing happened. It's sometimes the RAs were there, and it's you know what, keep it down. Where other times it's all right, we need to take some names. What's going on? It just happens. It's going to be college. It just depends on how severe is it and what's actually happening.
Yeah, I think that, again, it's one of those things where as long as DeAndre Francois is able to stay away from getting his name into any bad activity,
just bad situations,
he's going to be okay. But to your point that you just made, you never know. I mean, you could be doing something that you believe to be completely harmless and truly be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that has happened, I think, to a number of guys, in different things that we've heard in sports too, and in college sports. Sometimes the guy has done something egregiously wrong. Sometimes they are in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's crap. So I think that sometimes if you're the coach then too, you have to look at the situation and be was it just an unfortunate situation where you were in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is it just an unfortunate situation where you're not hanging out with the right people? And then Willie Taggart saying, you've got to hang out with the right people. If you're with your teammates, I feel like you're going to have a better chance of staying out of trouble than if you're off with people who... that he could at least say that I don't know. He knows his teammates. He's going to know the guys on the team.
Basically,
and that's
what
who
I
he's
would
going to
say,
want him to hang out with to be influenced.
If it was me and I was the coach, I would do the same advice my grandmother and then my mom have given me in the past of, all right, you're a starting quarterback for Florida State. Because of this, every decision that you make, whether it's going to a party, whether it's going out with these people, you need to ask yourself this one question before you say yes or no. How will this affect my starting job? And will this affect my starting job? The second one before the first one. If it's yes, then how? If it's no, then you're good to go. If it's no, all right, go. If it's yes, how will it affect? And then make the decision from there. And kind of to yourself, is it worth the risk? If X, Y, and Z go how they could go, and it does affect it, are you willing to live with that consequence? That's kind of what's got to go on in the mind, and not everyone either thinks about that or, there are times I've made decisions where I haven't necessarily thought like that, where it's wow, that could have gone really bad, and if it did, I probably would have gotten in huge trouble for that, and I probably shouldn't have done that. And thank God my stupidity did not ruin my chances or my great situation that I had going on for me at the time.
And I think DeAndre Francois just has to, in the back of his mind, think about that, because in my opinion, he is going to be the starting quarterback. He's going to win the starting quarterback job. I think that he has...
You took my question. I was going to ask you.
I think that he has a stronger arm. I think he's more accurate. I think that he has better quarterback vision. He certainly has better legs. We'll see how
he comes
that
back.
will go. But he just has a leg up on things over James Blackman. And that's not to say that James Blackman is a bad quarterback by any stretch, but he is just not what DeAndre Francois is. And that is why Francois is... He would have a lot at stake if he were to do anything wrong or get caught with anything during the regular season. But I really would like to believe that he has enough respect for his new head coach, who has already talked with him, who has sat him down, who has said, okay, you made a mistake. We're going to move on from it. You're going to learn from it, as I know you are, because you're doing community service and you just can't be involved in any criminal activity for a certain amount of time, blah, blah, blah. You got the point. Now we're moving on. We're only talking football.
Make sure we don't have to have this conversation again, basically, is what's going on. And you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you to end this, is basically, will he be the starting quarterback?
And how about you?
I'm going to say the same thing. I would go with DeAndre Francois. The only reason I wouldn't go with DeAndre Francois, or not necessarily wouldn't go, but the only way I have a quarterback question is if he is not where I want him to be. If he's either not where I want him to be with the knee injury, and if he's not that same quarterback, if he cannot adapt. So basically, you can't be as mobile as you used to be. Can you adapt to being more of a pocket passer? And if not, if that hinders what we want to do in our success, then I think about making a change, or I think about maybe starting Blackman over Francois. But right now, if I had to say it, I would go at Francois because he doesn't turn the football over as much, and his stats prove he's got more yards, more completions, more touchdowns, just better than Blackman right now. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section about Florida State, about who should be their starting quarterback this year. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. Housekeeping here at the end. If you want to help support the channel, make sure to check out patreon.com/MostValuable Podcast. $10 tier reward. You can be on the podcast each and every month. One podcasted MVP each month that you're at that tier. Also, if you want to buy a t-shirt, that store link also down below in the description, or it's on mostvaluablepodcast.com, where you can catch MVP each and every day. And last but not least, please go to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and give the Primetime Podcast a 5-star rating. Type in a little something about what you like about the podcast, why people should listen to it. It would mean the world to both Brandon and myself. Want to thank you guys for watching on YouTube. Want to thank you guys for listening on podcast services around the world. And as always, have a good day, everybody.